Okay, dear all, welcome. Welcome to the fourth and final masterclass for Bootcamp for Busy Entrepreneur, sponsored by the Cardano community in partner with Stone Partner. I'm Rocco Impecora, legal manager of Stone Partner. Let me introduce a little bit ourselves. Stone Partner is a professional consultancy firm, service provider, specializing in assisting crypto and blockchain projects. We have three main departments: finance and growth. That is basically our finance department, and with the finance department, we are helping our clients in, of course, fundraising and finding the right way to grow their own business. We have marketing and growth. And then, of course, there is a legal and compliance department, the one for which I work. And let's say for our client, we are doing a little bit everything that takes on the legal side of the business, from incorporating their legal entity in different jurisdictions, giving them some legal advice on different matters, helping them in drafting very specific agreement like SAFT, like market making agreement, or even the terms and conditions, the privacy policy and the cookie policy of their project. And of course, we are able to classify their own cryptographic digital token and giving them a legal opinion for their token. This lesson, the last one, is the topic is fundraising via token sale. So we are going to go through the dynamic world of the token sales. Let me explain you what we are going to see. We are going to see, of course, why a token sale is important for a Web3 project. Then we are going to understand how to choose your fundraising method, because, of course, let's say a token sale is not the only way in which you can fundraise your project, but I think this is it's kind of obvious. We are going to go through the different types of token sale, because there are different types of token sale with different based on basically both the token and the result you want to achieve. We are going to dig in on the maybe most important agreement when we are talking about token sale, that is the SAFT. And then we are going to give you some final legal consideration about this topic. I think we can start. So why a token sale is important for a Web3 project? I think this is the first and most important question we need to ask to ourselves when you're, let's say, approaching a token sale. Let's say that maybe you, even better than me, because I'm just a lawyer, as entrepreneurs, could understand that a project is not made by developers, is not made by coders, is not made by lawyers or the marketing team, but is made by a community. And the best way, let's say, to forecast this community is by binding it. And a token sale is definitely a good way to do so. So for sure, the first and most important things a token sale is bringing to a project is the sense of a community. And this is, let's say, our first point. Then, of course, given the fact that a lot of people will buy the token, or even a small, let's say, even friends or investors buying the token, they will speak about the token. They will put energy in order to have the project to succeed. So it's a sort of marketing campaign. So a token sale is also a part of a marketing strategy. Then, of course, the direct, let's say, implication of a token sale is the access to funding for the project. This is why a project is going through a token sale at the end. A Web3 project, as you perfectly know, is very complex and is something that you start a day and maybe it takes 2 years before seeing the light. So it's very important to have always access to fund. And a token sale is the right way to do so. In order, of course, to go through the development of the technology you need to develop, and of course to expansion a little bit also your community and the project, let's say, in general. As I said, the token sale is not the only way to fundraise. Of course, as you can know, you can of course let's go with the main two that are of course the fundraising through equity and the fundraising through your native token. One very important thing I want to underline is that these two are very different, but we need to make an assumption. We need to make, for example, that the token in this case is a pure utility token. I think in the past masterclass, you were able to dig into the difference of the classification of the token. Let's take into consideration that the difference between fundraising through equity and fundraising through the sale of a utility token. The first thing that important, the first big difference is based on the ownership and governance. Because of course, if I'm going to sell equity, I'm going to sell, of course, also a part, small or big, it's not important, of ownership and so governance of my project. And basically, the investor is becoming shareholder. This is a very important thing that we need to underline. If you are selling just token, the investors stay investors. So there is no good or bad way. Let's say it's not. We cannot say that equity is better than selling token, or selling token is better than equity. Of course, is a decision based on how do you want to structure your project, but you need to take into consideration that selling your own token keeps you, of course, the ownership of the project. Then, of course, if, for example, the token is a token representation of a share, this is completely different because maybe, if the shares is represented by a token, with a token sale, we can also, of course, sell equity. So it's very important to underline that we are talking about utility token and not security token. Then there is a difference of the commitment. Of course, when I'm going to buy equity, I'm going to a long-term relationship with the project because I'm becoming shareholder. Instead, if I'm buying the token, of course, there will be, as we see, a vesting schedule. So most probably, I will not receive the token in a short amount of period. Most probably, there will be a vesting schedule, and the vesting schedule might be long, even a couple of years. But it's important to understand that an investor who is investing in equity is binding himself in a long-term commitment with the project, while an investor or a buyer who is buying a token is not doing so. So also this is important. And then, of course, the investor expectation. The investor expectation in equity is much higher. And so also the liability of the project is higher, Instead, when an investor is buying a token, he or she knows that it's very common that they might lose their investment because, of course, of the market volatility, because of the uncertainty of the project, because the project is still at early stage. So even the liability on the project is, let's say, different. On this case, I would like maybe to do a point that it's not here, but it's very important. When you're going through a fundraising round through a token sale, the disclaimer are very important. It's very important for you guys to underline that crypto is a tricky field, that a project might not succeed, and basically to let the investor know from the very early beginning that is a risky field, that of course they might lost everything in order a little bit to cover your shoulder. This is very, very important, and this is linked, of course, to the investor expectation. We cannot promise the moon to our investors. It's very important to stick to the reality, to be very transparent, and to not, let's say, oversell our product in order to, let's say, avoid any kind of legal implication based on this overselling. This is actually something that is very, very important. We can go on the different types of token sale. As you know, there are different types of token sales. We here just have a general overview. We can go through the main ones. The initial coin offerings are personally one of the most interesting. I used to work as a financial lawyer, and the ICOs is the reason why I switched to crypto, because it was really interesting to see back in 2016, 2017, what was going on around the ICOs. And ICOs is in fact one of the earliest and more common form of token sale. In an ICO, a project is selling a utility token, and the buyer is buying this utility token through cryptocurrency/fiat. And of course, the token gives the buyer access to services, platforms, or product owned by the project. It's very important to underline that the token must be a utility, because this is the main difference between an initial coin offering and a security token offering. Here we can maybe take a step back and try to understand what are we talking about when we are talking about a utility token. Because a utility token, the classification of a token is based on, let's say, a regulation or a law or of a specific country. So a token might be qualified as a utility token for the Swiss framework or for the brand new European one, the MiCAR. But might be a security for the US, for example. In US, we know that 95% of tokens are qualified as security. So it's very important to understand in which jurisdiction I am part of and in which jurisdiction the project is when I'm entering into this type of token sale. Because it's important. Yes, please, a question.
So do we have to do KYC to know that, like, the nationality of the people that invest?
So this is a very good question. We will dig into this later, but let's say an important part of the SAFT, for example, is the list of countries from which the investors cannot come from.
Okay.
Because of their lack of regulation, because of the regulation is maybe super strict, like the US, like China. It's as you I think you know, is very common. It's very difficult to enter into a SAFT if you are a new US investor. It's possible, but you have totally different rules. Usually, a law firm has two types of SAFT template, one for US investor and one for non-US investor, because of course US is a big part of the market, but they have their own rules based on their jurisdiction. Then of course we need to avoid countries that are under sanction.
Yeah.
For example, North Korea, Iran, now Russia. Now Russia is a country that usually is on different lists. Then, of course, it depends on which country is releasing the list. But yes, it's very important to understand the jurisdiction. This is definitely a very important point. Then, in fact, usually a very important part of an agreement is to understand the jurisdiction. this agreement is based on the jurisdiction of the Swiss Confederation. And so yes, absolutely. A second type of token sale is the security token offering. The security token offering is the sale of a security token. A security token, as you might know, it represents the ownership in an underlying asset and may offer rights such as dividends, such as profit sharing. So it's a very tricky field, and it's very important here to understand that security token offerings, given the fact that we are here selling a security, are highly regulated, much more than the initial coin offering. And basically, it's much more difficult, not much more difficult, but it's, let's say, a little bit trickier to go through them, because you need, of course, to stick and to comply to a much complex regulation system. So this is very important to understand. And even here is very important, the jurisdiction, because as I said, we need to understand where the token is classified as a security in order to have a STL. Then we have the EDO, that is kind of new. The EDO is the initial DEX offerings. The initial it's called in this way. Why? Because the sale is conducted in a decentralized exchange. What is the main, let's say, characteristic of this kind of sale is that the sale here happens without any kind of the intermediaries. So it's the blockchain project selling the token directly to the users. And this is the main characteristic of the IDO. And the main difference also with the initial exchange offering, where there is an intermediary, who is the exchange. So we have the exchange that acts as an intermediary, and you buy the token through the exchange. What's, let's say, the main difference between these two is this, but for the user, usually is safer going through this. Why? Because yes, it's, let's say, more expensive because you have an intermediary, that is the exchange, but it's safer because the exchange usually take the responsibilities for the KYC of the project, for the due diligence of the project. So basically, the exchange, you are paying the exchange, the user is paying the exchange to having a little bit of screening on the project, and the project are paying the exchange in order to have, of course, a vast number of users. Here, the DeFi just take a transaction fee on. Yes.
So isn't IDOs only like the new way to be unregulated and just avoid like to have to check for nationalities and everything?
So this is a really good question, honestly. And so it was like this in the past, it happens, and maybe it's happening even now, but things are changing a lot. Now even DeFi platform needs to stick to a certain level of regulation, of course, especially on the AML procedures. So when we are speaking about anti-money laundering, it's very important also for them to be at least compliance with the basic form of regulations. So it's not like this anymore, I think, but this is my personal opinion. It's not my legal, let's say, opinion. It's just a different type of clients. Usually the DeFi clients wants to do not stay in an exchange. They want to keep their own fund, maybe in their wallet. So it's really a different type of clients also. So it's not only like that, but in the past for sure, and even now we can say that this is between the fourth, the less regulated for sure. Between the five, the less regulated for sure. But things are changing for sure. Then we have the last one that is the initial stake pool offering that is quite novel, and basically is based on the fact that you stake your token on a protocol, and the protocol reward you with you stake crypto on a protocol, and the protocol reward you with their own token. So the token here is a form of reward because of a staking mechanism. So as I don't know, on your exchange, you can stake a certain amount of token in order to get a certain amount of token but of the same token. Here is a little bit different because the staking process generate as a reward their project token. I don't know if you have any other question, guys, or I can. Yes, please.
It's like a launchpad, like the same processors, no?
Of the launchpad.
Yeah.
In a
Not
sort.
the same. But
Yes, exactly. No, in a certain way, yes. In a certain way, yes. In a certain way, yes. Then when we are talking about staking on a legal point of view is always a little bit tricky. So saying that is the same of the launchpad, but yes, let's say the output for sure is the output is the same. I'm staking crypto and I'm blocking money. I am ensuring to the project a certain financial stability, and because of that, they are rewarding me with their own token. So it's a way in which a protocol could, let's say, guarantee to itself a certain token, a certain financial stability, without giving away fiat and just using their own token. Okay. Now we can go to the, let's say, legal, pure legal part of the bootcamp, and what are the token sale contract, let's say, main feature. Token sale contract manage the issuance and the distribution of a token, ensuring transparency and, let's say, compliance within the process. So this is, let's say, the main characteristic. When we are talking about a token sale contract, something that is always present, and we will go through also the part that are, let's say, sometimes they are not present, is for sure the vesting schedule. As you perfectly know, it's very important to, in order to control the price and so to control the value of the project, to have a very clear vesting schedule, and that can regulate the release of the token to the various stakeholders. So I don't know, the team members, the investors, etc., over, of course, a predefined period of time. When we are talking about vesting schedules, it's very often we are talking about the lockup period. So a period in which the token is not sellable at all. A lockup period can be based both on a time-based, so I will release the token within 6 months, and you will be able to sell again the token within 1 year. This is a time-based, or a performance-based. So this is the roadmap. We have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. We are going to release the token at phase 2, and you will be able to sell the token at phase 4. So this is a performance-based lockup period. And then, of course, the governance mechanism that governs the agreement, that is very important, because gives the guideline of what are, let's say, the rules of the agreement. I'll give you, for example, some example. We can have let me understand how can I put, no, let's put it in another way. So something that is important but is not mentioned here because otherwise it's not a nice presentation, but it's maybe too boring. But it's important to underline is what is important to have in an agreement for an investor and what is important to have in an agreement for, let's say, the token issuer. As we said before, it's very important for the token issuer having a very strong disclaimer set in order to get let's say from the very beginning that the project is risky, of course, and the investor might lose their money and their investment. It's very important for the project. Sometimes it depends, of course, how advanced the project is to have maybe an NDA clause. So to not disclosure the token characteristic to others, to not disclosure the token allocation, and basically even the NDA could cover also the existence of the sale contract. An important feature that maybe investor should look at. So if I want to enter into a sale contract, it's very important to understand the refund policy, because as I said, it might happen that, for example, an investor will lose their money because the project is too early stage, because it's not well developed, because the token allocation was wrong, and the token goes to zero in a second. So it's very important for you guys to always, when you're signing a token sale contracts, to look into the refund policy. And another important thing you have to look at it is always the dispute resolution mechanism. What happened if someone of the parties is breaching the agreement? Which jurisdiction is the agreement's jurisdiction? In which court or arbitral procedure I will go in order to solve the issue. So it's another very important thing is definitely this. I don't know if you have any question regarding the token sale contracts feature, or we can move on. We can move on. Okay, this is maybe the most important slide. Here we are talking about one of the main contract when we are talking about, let's say, Web3 project. I think all of you already know a little bit what a SAFT is, a simple agreement for future token. We are going to dig into the definition. We are going to understand the purpose of the SAFT, the key feature of the SAFT, the role the SAFT has in the token sale, and the importance in, let's say, the SAFT, how important the SAFT is in Web3 fundraising process. So as you might know, a SAFT is a simple agreement for future token, and is a legal agreement between a blockchain project and an investor, outlining the terms of the investment of this future token sale. This is the definition. So as you can see, we have two main parties. One, we have the blockchain project, and then we have the investor. The SAFT, as you might know, is not for everyone. Is not for normal users, is not for exchange users as we see in the ADO, is not for, let's say, beginners. A SAFT is for an investor. What is an investor? And the definition of investor is kind of tricky because it's based on the relevant jurisdiction on the present in the agreement. We can say, let's say that an investor, we can consider universally an investor a VC, for example, a funds, and high net individual. So these are, let's say, usually 95% of the time the party involved in a SAFT. So a blockchain who is developing a token and an investor. A very important thing that is not mentioned here, but I really want to underline from the very beginning, is that at the end, the object of the agreement is the sale of the token. So it's very important that the token is defined. I had the chance to go through several SAFT, to draft several SAFT, and to see different projects that were approaching their, let's say, sale of their future token. And sometimes it happened that the tokenomics wasn't ready because they had an idea of the token, they had an idea of the project, and they went through the SAFT without a clear tokenomics. This is something that you should avoid completely. I will explain you why. Given the fact that the object of the agreement is the sale of the token, it's very important that the object is defined. I will give you a silly example, a very silly example. If I want to buy a car, the object of that specific selling agreement is, of course, the selling of the car. And I am expecting that the car has a certain characteristic. I don't know, that specific color, that specific engineer, that specific brand. And of course, if something is different, the agreement might be invalid. So it's very important to define, to have the tokenomics defined before going through a SAFT. And when I'm talking about the tokenomics, I'm talking about the utility of the token, so the characteristic of the token, the classification of the token, and of course, for sure, even the token allocation. We cannot say, for example, in the past happened that, let's say that we have a very clear understanding of the classification of the token, of the characteristic of the token, but then maybe the project switched from 100 million token to 500 million token. This is absolutely unacceptable because it deeply affects the quality of the token and so the price. So it's very important as first things to have a very clear understanding of the tokenomics. What is the purpose of the SAFT? In an agreement, the purpose, you have at least one purpose for each party. Here we have two parties. For sure, the purpose for the blockchain project is to, let's say, fundraise some money for the project. And the purpose for the investor is to get a good deal because they believe in the token and they believe, let's say, in the fact that they are buying the token usually at a very good price because the token is not even released. So it's this is, let's say, the main purposes of the token. I don't know if you have any preliminary question pertaining this part, or we can move on. Let's go to the feature of the SAFT, the main feature of the SAFT. As I said, the main feature is for sure we need to have an accredited investor. And here we go back to what we said before. Usually a good SAFT, as always, has an annex. For example, Annex A is for the list of countries from which the investor cannot come from. And the definition of investor, and the maximum amount the investor can invest within the project. So there is a very first part in which we need to define the counterparty, so the investor. Who is the investor? Where the investor is coming from? Who is taking care about the KYC of the investor? This is a very important part of the SAFT, actually, because when we are talking about the investor in a SAFT, we are talking also about the KYC, the KYB, and let's say all the AML measures you need to comply. So this is another, let's say, tricky point for a blockchain project that wants to enter into a SAFT, because at the end, they need to KYC the investor. What we suggest, no, let's say this is not a legal advice, but what you can do, it's better, it's to use a third-party service provider specialized in KYC, KYB, AML process, because it's a very tricky field. It's very easy to commit some mistakes in completely good faith. So it's very important to, let's say, let you guides from someone who is capable of doing so. There are several, let's say, very good service provider in this case. And this is something that is, let's say, very, very important. Another thing that, another key feature you will always find in a SAFT is the token allocation. As we said before, it must be crystal clear the characteristic of the token. So, for example, in which blockchain the token is developed, how many tokens will be released, how many tokens will the project keep for themselves as a treasury, how many tokens are they give away, what will be the initial price. So the token allocation is something that you will find in every SAFT. Like every SAFT, we will have, if it's a good SAFT, we'll have a token allocation. Then you will always find the investment terms. Usually the investment terms is in a form of an annex because it might change from investor to investor. I might give to a very close investor of mine that already believed in another project I developed in the past a better price than to another investor. So even the investment terms usually are in a separate annex because it's something that I can change and I can play with depending on who is going to sign the SAFT. The investment terms are, let's say, for sure, the price per token, the number of token the investor is going to purchase, the rights of the future token, because maybe I'm going to buy the token today, as we said before, but I will get the token in 8 months. Something that is always present is the payment schedule, because I can start a negotiation if I am the investor and say, okay, it's fine, you can give me the token after 8 months, but together with the vesting schedule, we will set in place a payment schedule. So I can pay you now 50%, and then for the next 6 months, I will pay you the rest, the other 50% in a different payment schedule. So also the payment schedule is something that is always present, and you have always to look at it, because it's a kind of tricky, it's a kind of tricky field. And then, of course, we have all the legal frameworks of a normal agreement. So it's usually it's quite common to find an NDA clause, as we said before. So a clause forcing the investor not speaking about the project and not telling no one about the project and no one about the characteristic of the token. It's for sure mandatory to indicate the jurisdiction of the agreement. So this agreement is based on the Swiss jurisdiction, and if we have any disputes, we will solve the dispute in front of a Swiss court. And of course, the liability sets. This is very important, and usually when you have a legal discussion about a SAFT, 9 times out of 10, the breaking points is the liability set. Is who is taking the responsibilities if, for example, the token will not be released? Who is taking the responsibilities if the vesting schedule will be changed? Who will take the responsibilities if, I don't know, we need to change something within the tokenomics, as we said before. So the liability set is something honestly, you should look at as the first close. It's really something that is kind of tricky, and for both parties, it depends who you are, but it's definitely something you need to look at it. And the liabilities clause must be always read together with the disclaimers, because usually they are really linked. What is the role of the SAFE of the SAFT in the token sale is kind of obvious. SAFT are, let's say, a bridge between the fundraising and the token distribution, and is the legal way in order we can, let's say, control a fundraising process. At the end, a fundraising process must be regulated, must have, let's say, a legal framework, and this legal framework usually has the form of a SAFT. Then, what is the important in Web3 fundraising? This, let's say, it's not a super legal answer, is my point of view, is the fact that through SAFT, we were able also to give to the industry a certain credibility. As you know, as entrepreneurs better than me, in the past, fundraising happened to occur in a very shadowy way sometimes. They weren't always super clear, and was easy, let's say, for an investor to lose their money without any kind of assistance, or to a project to be, let's say, totally eaten by a big investor, to a big from a big VC who bought all the token supply. It happened because there wasn't, let's say, a clear regulation on the maximum amount of token an investor can buy. So the importance of the SAFT is basically the importance of having always a legal framework around your project that is maybe the most efficient way to give credibility to your project. I don't know if you have any question pertaining to the SAFT, or we can move on. We can move on to the last slide, that is the final legal consideration. The final legal consideration is always the trickiest part, because like now I explain you a little bit, I give you, let's say, a little bit a framework about the token sale and how to regulate them and how to manage with them. But you have to understand that at the end, our industry, on a legal point of view, is very complex because it's not based on a single jurisdiction. So the regulatory compliance for token sale is always something very complex, because you have to take into consideration that we have a lot of, as we said before, jurisdiction with different rules, with very different approach, because maybe you are selling a token that is a utility, but for another jurisdiction is a security, and for another jurisdiction is an hybrid token. So it's very important to always understand that being compliant on a regulatory point of view in the industry is not easy, and you have always have to deal with cross jurisdiction. What I would like to suggest you is always to act in good faith. That is for sure the best approach ever to start with. And then, of course, let's say there are some golden and general rules. For example, when we are talking about regulatory compliance for token sale, we are talking about also AML rules. AML rules are kind of, let's say, universal now, because of the globalization, because of the global market, because of, let's say, the direction the world is going through. So when you are stick with the AML, the general and the world recognized AML regulation, I think that's a good start. Then, of course, another important thing you need to understand is the tax obligation that might change from a country to another country. So it happens that, for example, for a jurisdiction, I purchase a token through a SAFT, and the token will be released in 2 years. And maybe for one jurisdiction, I need to pay tax from the day I purchase, and for another jurisdiction, I have to pay tax on that when I receive actually the token. So it's very important always to understand the tax implication of what we are doing. That is very complex, and it's definitely not easy to deal with. And then, of course, another thing that, yes, please.
If we want to sell like a token, how are we responsible for is it our problem if the client doesn't like?
I got your question. I think I got your question.
Why do I need to care about the fact that they pay their taxes? That's my problem, in fact.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you very much for your question, because I think it's a question, it's a quite a common question. A lot of people is asking this. Yes, is absolutely not. If I'm selling a token, it's not my responsibilities what basically the purchaser is doing with their own taxes. Okay. That's for sure the point. But it's important for you to understand that maybe there is if I'm selling something, and if I'm getting money from that seller, from that selling, I'm generating a revenue. Yeah. And given the fact that I'm generating a revenue, I might have to pay tax on that revenue. Okay. So even for me, who I'm selling the token, is important to understand in which tax ecosystem am I. And because maybe I'm selling a token, I receive fiat. I'm selling 2,000 of my native token. I'm receiving 2,000 US dollar. Maybe I have to pay tax right now. Maybe I have to pay tax once I cash out the money. So even on let's say the blockchain project side, the tax implications are very important. Of course, you are not liable, responsible for the tax obligation of the counterparty.
Yes, but is it my responsibility to communicate about to the customer about
another very good question. So theoretically, no. So theoretically, everyone is responsible for their own part, but it's very good. It's very, very good to be crystal clear, to avoid any kind of misunderstanding, to put into the disclaimer that the purchaser is directly responsible for their tax obligation. This is something, for example, that we do in our SAFT template. This is something that is not mandatory to have, but we have because of that. Because it's very easy then to fall into misunderstanding. So yes. And then, of course, another thing that that is important for, let's say, regulatory compliance for token sale is the due diligence. The due diligence on what? It depends on the parties. If I am an investor, the due diligence will be on the project. So how long the project is alive, who is working on the project. We saw in the past a lot of scams, because behind a token there was maybe just a couple of pictures of a couple of nice guys, maybe generated with AI, and that's it. So it's very important now, and I think the market is really changing in this, because the investors now are very, very careful about their due diligence on the project. So understanding, I don't know, who are the developers, the former projects of the founders, how many money the project needs in order to be completely functional, and of course, is even more important for the project to do a due diligence on the investor. And this is very tricky on a legal point of view, because at the end, this is the KYC process. I need to understand who the investor is, who the investors are, where the money comes from. This is a very, very important thing. And that's why I told you that you might be structured enough to do it by yourself. But if you are not so, I really suggest you to use a third-party service provider, because it's something that it's really tricky, and it's really easy to do mistakes. And yes, please.
Quick question. So if I use a third-party service for this, right? Who is responsible if the mistake will be found out?
That's a very good question. So you will sign an agreement between your company and the third-party service provider, and you have to be very, very strict on this in the liability clause on that specific agreement. So the responsibilities will be, let's say, set in the agreement between you and the third-party service provider. Usually, you will be responsible directly in any case, but then, for example, I'm onboarding some investors, but I'm using a third-party service provider. The third-party service provider is not doing a good job, and one of the investors is taking his money from selling weapons around the world. I'm directly responsible for that. Usually, then, of course, as I said, it depends on the agreement between you and the service provider. But given the fact that I enter into the agreement, I'm showing my good faith, and usually I can, let's say, sue, of course, the service provider. So it's like a chain. I don't know if you get. I'm responsible. The project is responsible for the onboarding of the wrong investor. Is directly responsible for the onboarding of the wrong investor, and then the service provider is responsible in front of the project, because the responsibilities was not because the responsibility, because the service provider doesn't perform the service he was paid for. So yes, please.
A quick one. So that means that I'm not fully getting rid of this risk as a company. I'm minimizing the risk by outsourcing this stuff to the third party, and that means I need to double check what kind of the financial, I don't know, reserves do they have in case of the court suit.
So this is a very tricky field, and honestly, you can even avoid any kind of responsibility if in the agreement between you and the service provider, you said crystal clear, all the responsibilities will be on the service provider. Of course, this has a different price. You can even ask, for example, there are some obligation in respect of keeping all the due diligence and KYC and AML materials. Who is keeping all this material? Usually the project, but you can even pay the service provider to storage them for on your behalf. So it's really a matter on how much money do you want to spend in this in order, let's say, to avoid any kind of yes, please.
But is it gonna be like a special amount or a percentage fee, or when we pay like KYC for validation?
Basically, the market is really advanced on this. You can have, for example, an AML officer.
Yeah.
You can have a guy who is paid only for doing this. And in this case, the liability will be on the company. Why? Because the guy will be an employee of the company. So it's on a legal point of view, we are treating him as another employee, so as a developer. So it's really part of the organization. So you can have a freelancer. So outside of the company, one guy who is helping you, and the responsibility will be on him as a physical person. Or you can have a company, another company. So an agreement between two legal entities. And the responsibilities will be, as I said before, depends on the agreement, but let's say on them. So it's the market is really advanced now on this regard. It's there are like several options.
Can you show us an example of a sample of a SAFT?
So here now, this setting is a miracle for me. Like I'm super scared of touch the screen and destroy everything. What we can do, given the fact that you are here, I can show it to you later. Absolutely, I will be pleased to do so. I can show you it, our template. I think it could be very useful. And for the guys from home, I will speak with Nicola, our head of the legal and compliance department, to understand if maybe we can upload a sort of very basic SAFT template, so maybe everyone can have the chance to see a SAFT and how a SAFT is drafted. I think it's a very good point. I would like to close it with something that I already told, that is the jurisdictional difference and legal challenges. Our ecosystem on a legal point of view is super new. Like 5 years ago, the regulation in place were barely zero. And now we can see that in just 5 years, European Union was able to get a very strong regulation, MiCAR. Switzerland has its own regulation. A lot of other countries are moving in this regard, even the UK, Brazil, the Emirates, a lot of offshore jurisdictions. So as a project owner, you need to understand that the law behind your project is really alive and is really changing. For a lawyer, it's very challenging because you really need to keep yourself updated almost on a weekly basis, because always something is happening around the world. But on your side, you have to understand that there are a huge difference between country to country. As we said before, we can have I'm selling a utility token because I'm in Switzerland, but with the same token, if I'm selling it in the US, is a security. So it's very important to understand that there are huge jurisdictional differences. And the market, together with the regulations, are changing a lot, even in a year. Like the legal, let's say, landscape in Europe now is very, very different from the legal landscape in Europe last year. So it's really a matter of always try to keep ourselves informed, updated, and that's it.
And what would happen if in between the moment where we signed the SAFT and the moment we gave the token out, like the legalization change and something in the SAFT would be incorrect?
So this, thank you for the question. Usually, 95% of the case, law is never retroactive. Okay. Like, if today, I will give you like some silly example. If today the speed limits of that road is 70 kilometers per hour, and every day I'm going to 68 kilometers per hour, and tomorrow they put 50, I will not get fined because for a lifetime I've been going to 78. So if I'm signing a SAFT, the law governing the SAFT is the one indicated in the SAFT at the time in which the SAFT was signed. Okay. Then, of course, if the law will change, we will need to amend the SAFT. We will need to understand what's going on in order to be compliant. But if you did everything correctly, you will not, let's say, get fined for something that it's impossible to predict. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. This was our last lesson for the Cardano community. I hope you enjoyed. You can find us on the social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter. We are happy to assist you for your crypto and blockchain project, and happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You did it.
Yes.
That's very useful.